Welcome and thank you for joining this month's Women of Innovation Spotlight webinar, Recruitment, Retention, and Promotion of Women in Tech. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to let additional people come in, and then we will begin. All right, well, welcome again, and thank you for joining us. Again, this is Recruitment, Retention, and Promotion of Women in Tech. I'm Elizabeth Durgan, Committee Co-Chair for the Women of Innovation Program. Women of Innovation is now in its 17th year, recognizing women and girl innovators, role models, and leaders in science and tech, including high school and collegiate levels of STEM talent. People pursuing the tech professions. The deadline for 2021 nominations is this coming Friday, June 18th at midnight. So if there's an exceptional woman or girl you know who works or studies in STEM related fields, you can submit her name. In one of 10, you have 10 categories to select from. And the nomination link and the www.womenofinnovation.org website link will be shown again at the end of the webinar. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Medtronic, News 8, WTNH, Pfizer, and Sonalysts. If your organization is interested in supporting the Women of Innovation program this year, please contact us at events@ct.org. There will be a Q&A session immediately following the presentation. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time. Just use the Q&A button on the screen. And today's presentation is being recorded. We will provide you with a link as well as the video deck shortly after the webinar's conclusion. The slide deck, sorry. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for today's presentation, Martha Yaney, owner and CEO of Vista Group International and Women of Innovation Finalists in the entrepreneurship category.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay? I'm so excited to be here in order to introduce Jenny Gaffney, who is our 2020 Women of Innovation finalist in the Large Business Innovation and Leadership category. It's a very wonderful opportunity to learn about her business and her passion of sponsoring and retaining women in the tech field. Jenny Gaffney is a senior manager for Walt Disney's Direct Media and Entertainment Division. She's currently supporting ESPN App, ESPN.com, the Fantasy App, the Fantasy Web, and more. So she's a sports enthusiast, a mom, a quilter, and she loves all things Disney. She has an MBA and advanced business certificates in both human resources management and project management from the University of Connecticut, and she uses all those skills mixed up at once. So we're going to hear how she does that and how she encourages others. She also has a Bachelor of Business Administration from Cumberland University. So I'm happy to turn this over to Jenny and look forward to hearing all about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present and talk about such a very important topic that I'm very passionate about and I think is very relevant in today's market. So a little bit about me, I'll start there and then I'll get into the main topic for today's presentation. I'm known around the company as an organizer of chaos. I enjoy taking complex problems and finding solutions that can be scaled and work for everyone. My background is in product, project, and team management and leadership. I love product management and project management. I'm Agile certified. I'm a Scrum Master. I'm a certified product owner. If you're not in Agile, those things just sound funny to you, but if you are, they mean something. But that's what I've spent my career focusing on, is Agile product and project management and the coaching and leadership of people. I'm very passionate about the recruitment, retention, and promotion of women in technology. I originally started my career with Disney, working directly for ESPN, and I was on the board of Disney's ESPN's Women in Technology. We later reorged into what was called Disney's direct-to-consumer and international brand. I served on the leadership team there as well, and now we've reorged again into Disney's media and entertainment distribution, and I'm on the board of Women in Technology there too. I'm very passionate about these topics, and I try to do whatever I can to promote all areas of this in the technology industry. My interests are education, technology, entrepreneurship, sports, and coaching. This is a picture of me in the World Series growing up catching. I love this picture. I thought it would be relevant because I'm not really sure if I caught the ball and then I am so in one with the sport that I tossed it from my glove to my hand to throw back to the pitcher, or if I closed my eyes because it's a foul tip and I was about to get knocked out. So it's not really clear to me what's happening in this picture, but I'm definitely passionate about softball and went to the World Series twice growing up and love all things sports. My strengths include the utilizing Agile methodology and tools. I love to negotiate. It's unfortunately a skill that my 2.5-year-old daughter has picked up really well, and wanting one more Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or one more snack before she goes to bed. But I really enjoy negotiating. I feel like that's a skill I got from my father. Organizing chaos, as I mentioned, and problem solving. This is a Google Map version of my life and everywhere that I've lived. I started out in Royal Oak, Michigan. I lived there until I was 5, and we moved to Columbia, Tennessee. You've probably never heard of it. It's the mule capital of the world. Your little fun fact of the day, where we have Mule Day every year, including a pageant and parade. I lived there until I was 17. I went to school at the University of Alabama, Huntsville my freshman year. I studied astrophysics. I was really into that. After my freshman year, I transferred for a softball scholarship and academic scholarship to Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee. It's the headquarters of Cracker Barrel International. Little also fun facts. From there, I moved to Farmington, Connecticut to help start a company called Renzulli Learning with some of the professors from the University of Connecticut. They had to do quite the negotiating to get me to leave the South and head to winter and the snow in Connecticut. But once I got here, I fell in love with it. I met my husband here. We lived in Farmington for a lot of years before I moved then to Austin, Texas, when the company I worked for, Renzulli Learning, was sold to a larger company called Compass Learning. Stayed at Compass Learning a few years, transitioned to a company called Sapling Learning, which focused on STEM homework for students in college. Stayed there. My husband's mother was very sick with pancreatic cancer. We decided to move back to be closer to family. We moved to Norwalk, Connecticut. I ran social media management for some of the largest companies in the world. Anheuser-Busch, Plato's Closet, Once Upon a Child, William Ravis. I had no experience in social media management, but I took the leap and was doing Facebook advertising, LinkedIn, all sorts of stuff, doing posts for franchisee, franchisor type of businesses. After Norwalk, we moved to Wallingford, Connecticut. I got my MBA at the University of Connecticut. I worked for a couple years in the healthcare industry. And after that, I found ESPN. I actually had to go to Europe as part of my MBA program. Well, I didn't have to, but I had to have some international credits, either taking international classes in Harvard or traveling overseas. And I decided, why not? So I went to France for a couple of weeks. And when I was there, I actually met an associate director at ESPN and said, hey, why don't you come join us over at ESPN and Disney? And I applied for a job. Actually didn't get it, waited a couple months, applied for another job. They filled it internally and then got the job. And I've been there now almost 5 years. So that's kind of my tour of where I am. After Wallingford, I moved to Wolcott, Connecticut just a few months ago in the middle of a pandemic. We moved in September to be a little bit closer to work. Not that I'm going into the office nowadays, but we also have a beautiful view now of a reservoir and decided that we wanted to move in this past fall. Part of that, part of me is my family. This is my immediate family. This is my husband, Chris. He's a writer and a stay-at-home dad. This is my beautiful daughter, Grace, and that's my son, Oliver Seneca Gaffney. My husband wanted to name him Senator Mortimer Gaffney. I negotiated and we ended up with Seneca and Senny as a nickname because he was not going to have the name Mortimer. So that's my family. I did run this presentation by my daughter Grace last night. Her feedback was that I should change the title to say by Jenny and Grace, which I did not incorporate, but her other piece of feedback, which I did incorporate, was that I added more pictures. She wanted more pictures of Grace and more pictures, and Elizabeth actually had given me similar feedback that people love pictures, so I added some more pictures throughout here to make my 2-year-old happy. So here's a picture of my coworkers. This was the night of ESPN Plus, the night that we launched in April of 2018. We got together at 11:30 at night in Bristol, Connecticut. This is me over here in this war room. When we just got started, you can see it's pitch black outside, and this is me at 3:30 p.m. the following day, having only moved from that chair a handful of times. And I loved every minute of it. When I grew up and was studying astrophysics and studying and went to Space Academy when I was in the 8th grade, I always thought I'd work for NASA. And I feel like this was the closest that I ever got in my career so far. We had kind of this war room set up and this entire floor was just full of people. And my job that night was release night coordinator across ESPN, Disney, our hypercare teams, what was called Disney streaming services. And my job was to do the play-by-play of everything that was happening, to initiate rollout across Android, iOS, and so on. And it was by far the best night of my career. I loved it, and I talk about it all the time because it was a really neat experience that felt like kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So enough about me. I want to talk now about the recruitment, retention, and promotion of women in technology. So that's what I'll get into now. So for me, the recruitment of technology really begins with the community. It's getting your brand out there. It's getting your name out there. It's getting involved so that younger women can see and know role models in the community. So some of the things that I've done in particular and that Disney and ESPN has been a part of is the Connecticut Invention Convention. I know one of the previous panelists went on about all her inventions and all the crazy stuff that she's done, and I feel like it's way more impressive than me at that age. But the Connecticut Invention Convention, I was a guest judge for 2 years, and I loved it. I loved how every invention that people come up with at, in elementary school is like the mailbox 2000 or whatever. Everything had to have a cool number at the end of it, and I loved it. And I think it's good to encourage all of our young students to try to innovate and become entrepreneurs so early in life. We didn't have that, or at least I didn't have exposure to that growing up. And I think it's a really neat event that the state sponsors. The next thing is Girls Who Code. We have our engineers at Disney and ESPN go out into the community and meet with girls in high school who are interested in coding and provide mentorship to them. And then something else local that we do is volunteer work in the community. I've gone to Food Share a couple of times and organized peppers from big pallets into individual bags for people in the community who are who need the help. The other things that I think help with the recruitment of tech, and again, another picture of my daughter, because I feel like you can't start too young with the recruitment. And this is another picture of her. But some of the other things that we do to try to promote the recruitment of technology, or that I think you can do on the call. I know we have people on this call from internship to CEO, and so I'm trying to hit a variety of audiences. I also think that every single bullet point that I have here could be its own webinar in and of itself, and it could be listed under any of the 3 topics: recruitment, retention, or promotion of women in technology. So one of the things that we get a lot of internships from, and a lot of young women coming out of college, is the Grace Hopper Conference. If you don't know about it, research it. I think it's a great talent pool to introduce younger women to your company. The other thing is partnerships. I got my MBA at UConn. I was an ambassador for the program. I love to go back and help UConn recruit more people for their MBA program, but also for technology and getting involved. The other thing that we do is internships. Maybe your company provides internships, maybe they don't. If they don't, I strongly encourage you to look into it. These interns nowadays are remarkable. Like, they're so impressive. It's insane. One of the things that I do personally with the internships and did last summer is all of their social hours. I encouraged every intern to meet 100 people by the end of summer, because that's how they're going to get the jobs and stay longer term. And our company is making those connections and networking. I had the rule that I gave each of the people that I met with. I said, I will meet with you and I will connect you to 3 more people. And those 3 people, I would ask to connect to 3 more people. And the idea was that by the end of summer, all these interns would have met 100 people at the Walt Disney Company, which isn't very hard to do. There's, hundreds of thousands of people at the company. And that's one of the things that I think is a good takeaway for people who are trying to network, or maybe you're in between jobs right now, or maybe you're trying to recruit people right now, is the best thing you can do is help connect people to other people. And then rotational programs, I think, are really important, especially for younger women. If your company can do this, I think it's amazing. Unfortunately for me, one of the things that happened early in my career is I worked at a startup. I was like one of the first 10 employees there, and I had the opportunity to do payroll, hiring, firing, marketing, professional development, sales, curriculum and instruction. And I learned all of those things early in my career. And as I went in my career, I could figure out what I was good at, what maybe other people were better than me at, and things that I liked to do and things I didn't like to do. And so when I started, I kind of narrowed down and hired people who could take on some of those other responsibilities that I perhaps didn't enjoy as much, and then really focus in on the things that I enjoy. And I think the equivalent of that nowadays is either hiring at a smaller company, you kind of have that where you have the freedom to wear a lot of different hats, or at larger companies doing a rotational program where you have a developer who's allowed to do 6 weeks of Android development, and maybe they can shadow backend development or front-end development, or maybe they can even shadow a totally different division in the company. And I think something either that's, sanctioned by the company or not, I think it is really good to allow these women to explore and encourage curiosity outside of just what they're doing in their day-to-day. Because I don't know about you, but when I was 17 to 21, I didn't know that I would end up at Disney. I didn't know that I would end up even necessarily in technology. And I feel like we're putting a lot of pressure on kids, even in kindergarten. I keep seeing on Facebook, what do you want to be when you grow up? You don't know in kindergarten. You don't even know a third, at all what all the possibilities are for you to become when you get older. I think it's aspirational that kindergartners have exposure to that, but I also think as you grow in your career, you should have more opportunities to try different things and fail, and then try something different. I think that's maybe missing a little bit when we recruit people for a specific opportunity without giving them the creative flexibility to try a variety of things. Most of you on this call have probably read the book LinkedIn. If you haven't, you probably know Sheryl Sandberg. Most of you also probably know this quote. There's some controversy about whether or not it's 100% accurate, whether or not the survey actually happened and how many women were in it. But that's not really relevant to the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that men apply for the job when they only meet a certain amount of the criteria, but women feel this desire that they have to meet, or this pressure that they have to meet 100% of the qualifications when they go to apply for a job. So one of the things that I would encourage you, and I know there's some recruiters on this call, is only put the things that you really have to have in order to be hired for the position that you need help with. You don't have to know specific tools like Jira or Microsoft Word or Excel. You need to be competent and willing to learn those things, right? If you know one thing, you can, if you know Google Docs, and you can pretty easily figure out Microsoft PowerPoint. You know what I mean? Like, don't get so specific and list 100 things that you have to have. I feel like that will open up your pool for a lot more candidates. Also, be sure that you have inclusive language in your job postings, making sure that you're not including gender bias in your postings. Again, that could be its own webinar. There's tons of resources online for how to do that, but I'm just trying to highlight it here as something that you can do when you're recruiting or bringing new people into your company. And then the other thing is proactively and intentionally recruiting a diverse pool of candidates. Don't accept if you only get 10 applicants and they're all white males. Say, I'm leaving this open until we get females that apply, or until I get different people of different backgrounds that apply for this position, or make it a requirement when you interview people. I have to interview X number of men or X number of women before we'll make an offer to a candidate, or proactively reach out on LinkedIn to women that you think are strong and have a good background, or a diverse pool of candidates, not just women. I mean, that's relevant outside of that, but just be intentional and proactive when you're recruiting. I think that'll make a huge difference. Some of you have control over that, and I understand some of you don't. Like, some of you don't hire people, some of you are wanting to be hired, but those are kind of my words of wisdom for people who are in that recruitment type position. So retention of women in technology. I'll share these stats with you. They make me sick to my stomach. I hope they probably do the same to you. I'm so upset about these things, but one is women are leaving the workforce in droves as a result of COVID-19. It would be a stretch for anybody to say they haven't been impacted by COVID, but there's 2.2 million fewer women in the workforce in just a year. Why? I mean, there's a million reasons why, but childcare, being stressed, having to take on homeschooling, it was a lot, and it set us back. I've read articles that say over a decade from the progress that we've been making in trying to bring more women into the workforce and into technology. Another statistic I just read yesterday in the LA Times, and no, I don't normally read the LA Times, but it came up in my Apple News. There's an article called "Welcome to the Summer of Quitting: Why Many of Us Are Saying Goodbye to Our Jobs," and I found it super interesting. The article said that more than 3.9 million people have quit their jobs in just April alone. And they listed why, because some companies are saying you have to come back to work. You have to be in an office starting July 6th or starting after Labor Day. You have to come back to the office. And people are going, no, I don't want to come back to the office. Why? We've been working remotely and it's successful. Why are we going backwards in terms of allowing flexibility, allowing more times with family? That's a big reason that people are switching companies, because some companies are saying, work wherever you want. We don't really care. Get the job done. You may have to be there between 10 to 2 every day or core hours, but there's the companies that are succeeding, in my opinion, are the ones that are allowing more flex time. Some people just need a break. They're so stressed out, and this coronavirus is taking a toll on them. They just want a break, and they don't have something else lined up. They're going to take the summer off, recuperate, relax, de-stress. And I think all those reasons and 1,000 more are why people are quitting, and this attrition. And you see companies now paying a lot more than I feel like they ever have, because every company that I've had exposure to lately is dealing with this in one way or another. The retention of women, for me, I think is personally, I find a lot of value in employee resource groups focused towards women, allowing the women to self-organize and providing content for women no matter where they are in their career. So you can't just focus on, you know, the women who are fresh out of college and providing networking opportunities and providing happy hour at 5 o'clock on a Friday. You also have to take the mid-level managers and providing content for them on how they can be promoted or how they can succeed. You also have to, you know, there are a lot of moms that are working and providing content about childcare and providing content about, or just an opportunity for them to vent and meet with other women, I think is super important and makes you feel so not alone and a part of a bigger community than yourself. Preventing burnout, again, I think why people are quitting is burnout or leaving the workforce. They're burnt out. They're trying to do everything. People have been unable to backfill positions because of the coronavirus, maybe revenue's down, and women are taking on, and not just women, men too, are taking on a lot more than they did, I feel like personally, before coronavirus. I put work-life balance in quotes. I don't think that that's a real thing. I think there's times in your life when work is going to require more out of you than your life and your kids, and sometimes it's going to be the opposite. I think over time, though, companies have to work and provide comp time, either officially or unofficially, to give some sort of balance. If you're working really hard on a project and it launches, trust me, it's not going to kill you to give your employee a day off on Friday or let them leave early on Friday, or something similar to that. I think that goes a really long way in saying that you appreciate and care for your employees. Again, another topic for me that I feel like could be its own webinar: what motivates people? Dan Pink wrote a book. He has a TED Talk. He has YouTube videos. What he talks about is that And the type of jobs that we're talking about here is women in technology. We're not talking about the stuff that people are going to be motivated by another $500 bonus or you know, anything like that. What he talks about a lot is the three things that really motivate people are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think this goes a long way with the retention of women in technology. He says, give people enough money that they don't need to worry about money, and then focus on these three things: the autonomy, which is giving them the power to self-direct; mastery, which is getting as good as you can at something; and the purpose, meaning that I'm a part of something bigger. I think that's huge with millennials. They want to make the world a better place than when they got there. And I think these three things are things that businesses and leadership can do that will go a long way, right? Let the team self-organize. Let the team have 2 days for a hackathon. Let the team, you know, decide, you know, what they're going to call their own project, a code name. You know, that autonomy goes a really long way in preventing burnout and preventing and encouraging employees to be a part of a bigger purpose. And then I think too, a clear path and timeline defined for promotion is huge for the retention of women in technology. I've had so many friends leave not only Disney, but other companies because they felt like there was no clear path for them to move forward, or somebody would have to retire in order for them to move forward. And I think every company struggles with this and works on this and tries to do things to correct this. But I think you should be very transparent in how you can get from one step to another. Again, I talked about location and people leaving because they don't want to go back to the workforce, perhaps in person. Is it really that important? Maybe it is. If you work in a lab, I have sister-in-laws and friends who work in labs. Location is important. Being in that office or being in the lab every day is important. But for some, it's not important. Nothing changed overnight on July 5th. That means you need to be back in the office if you've been doing it successfully for a year and a half otherwise. But maybe it's not. Maybe if location is important, maybe there's different brands. I worked when I first started for ESPN. Now I'm still running all of sport. Now I'm running more sports, not just a fantasy app, but I'm also doing ESPN App and ESPN Web. But we have lots of brands at Disney. We have, you know, Star Wars, ABC News, Fox Sport, or I'm sorry. We have, you know, Fox Netherlands that we just took on, but there's a lot of different things that you can do. If your company's not that big, what if you have different departments? If you want to keep somebody who's a really good performer, can you put them in marketing instead of, you know, just let them try it, do something different to keep the women working and engaged. Benefits are huge. What benefits are your company offering, or what benefits if you're an intern looking for something eventually that are going to be important to you? Parental leave is huge, not just maternity leave, but paternity leave. What are you doing to compensate and allowing the family's time to bond? Flex time, right? Do you really have to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, or can you start at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? What's the flex time? We have people on the West Coast, in the UK, India, Australia, you name it. There's not going to be one time that kind of works for everybody. And so allowing that flex time and remote work, I think, are huge. Mentors and mentees, I think this has been talked about in some of the previous webinars, goes a really long way. If you're not doing this officially at your company, I strongly encourage you to. Women need to see other women in leadership positions, and they need to have access to those women in leadership positions. And I think it goes a long way. And it doesn't just have to be women mentors. It's totally okay to have male mentors and male mentees for women in tech, but it goes a really long way. And then again, networking. So the promotion of women in technology, one that I'm really passionate about, and this ties in so closely with the other two topics. But I think it's very important that leadership teams work with their staff to define the steps that women need to be promoted. I often think that that's not as transparent as it should be, and maybe it's not as defined as it should be. Another thing that I see especially with my friends in technology and women in technology, is that come end of year, they're being told, you're great. You don't need to change anything. Everything's perfect. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. But like, that's not super helpful to having the actual growth and development that you need. So I think some of the things that companies can do is offer professional development, have open, honest, transparent, constructive feedback. I'm not talking about attacking somebody or taking one example and blowing it out of proportion. And I'm also not talking about a lot of companies say, look, I have to say one thing bad about you, or I have to say one thing. And so I'm going to nitpick one thing and turn it into this huge, you know, mountain out of the molehill situation. retention. I think it's just in general, if you're giving constructive feedback consistently, it goes a long way to helping women in tech develop as leaders. Those can be uncomfortable conversations too. They don't just have to be end of year conversations. They can happen quarterly, they can happen weekly or bi-weekly in your one-on-ones. I think it's a lot more helpful to women if they're getting that frequent instead of just saying everything's good, keep doing it, because that leads to burnout and frustration, right? And that goes into the retention problem that companies can face. One of the things that I learned from Libby Geist, whose brother is Willie Geist on the Today Show, one of the advice she gave at this award ceremony I went to one time was Boston, is somebody told her, Libby, you're not really in charge of anything, right? Like you help and you're on the support staff of all of these big things, but really own something. And I remember her telling the story about how she took on 30 for 30, which is our films that we offer at Disney through ESPN and their documentaries. And Libby kind of took that on and owned it, and then kind of made a name for herself because she took on these high visibility projects. So I say to women, sign yourself up for it. Even if you think you're going to be over your head, you can get help along the way. Even if you fail, it's going to be okay. You're going to recover, but take on and really take ownership of these high visibility projects. It will change your career. I honestly think my trajectory at Disney changed after the launch night of ESPN Plus. I was the one coordinating that night. I got my name out there. I met so many people, and I feel like that really did nothing but benefit me. And I would give the same advice to women, is raise your hand and ask to be in charge of bigger things. And then something that you can do as an ally for women in tech is amplify them. Send thank you notes, either electronically or old school, handwritten, and give them kudos. That copying their boss's boss, copying the CEO. If you are the CEO, send them a letter and say thank you, copying their direct boss. That goes a really, really long way for retention, and also will help with them like feeling like they're a part of it. And then nominate them for awards. This whole webinar, this whole series is about trying to get more people to nominate for the Women of Innovation Awards. That goes a really long way to amplifying the voice of women in technology. So if you know somebody that is a phenomenal woman in technology, please take the time and nominate them for the Women of Innovation Award. And then I'll call this my bonus content. Every webinar I give the same 3 pieces of advice. It's changed a little bit over the years, but I'll call it bonus content because I think it's really important. A lot of people that I mentor will say, how do I grow as a leader? How do I go from, being an individual contributor to being a manager, or being a leader? And I give the same kind of 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, this article that I read, my husband sent to me. He doesn't even remember sending it to me, but he sent it to me years ago on entrepreneur.com. It was invest in you. Take 3% of your gross income and spend it on yourself, on professional development for yourself. You're saying, Jenny, I don't do math as gross and net income. What's the difference? It doesn't matter. The point is, take some money, set it aside, or ask your company on your behalf and set it aside to actually growing as a person and as a leader. I think it's really important that you never stop learning. The second piece of advice I always give is always be positive. My husband and I call this ABP philosophy. If we're out in town and it's hot and I'm kind of grumpy and I say something that maybe is a little negative, he'll just look at me and go, ABP. And it's just like, ugh, okay, you're right. Like the kids are picking up on your vibe, other people pick up on your vibe. And in work, it's really easy to fall into the grumpy cat IT guy or grumpy cat IT girl personality because you're, so the pandemic and you're stressed and all these other things. But people that are positive draw other people closer to them. And I think it's really important as much as you can to be positive. And then the third is network. Connect with super connectors. I talked to my husband about this last night. He had never heard the term. Maybe you haven't. This is kind of a visual display, in my opinion, of what a super connector is. It's one person who can connect you, kind of like I was doing with the interns, to 3 other people or 10 other people. But you're not just saying, Jenny, meet Martha. You're saying, hey, tell me about you. Tell me about your experiences. And then I know other people in the field that I can help connect you to that may help and benefit you. And eventually they may be able to help and you may be able to help them and vice versa. And I think it's really, really important. Early off in my career, after that startup and I moved to Texas, I found myself in a different city than where I had been living. And I found myself looking for new work. And I didn't have a resume. I didn't have LinkedIn. I didn't have a network. And I realized really quickly how important all of those things are and how important they are to keep them updated and to put energy into keeping them constant and meeting new people all the time. This is very important. So with that being said, this is my contact information. It's my email address, my LinkedIn. Please reach out to me if I can ever be of any assistance to you or your company or someone you know, somebody who's lost their job, who might need some coaching or whatever it is. I'm happy to help in whatever way that I can, and I'd really love to meet all of you and see what I can do to help you in your network. So that's all that I have for today, Martha.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for that insight into these various, shall we say, stages of women working in the tech field and their companies and what they can do to recruit and find qualified people, to train them and mentor them and enrich their abilities, and then to support them throughout that period of time while they're working with them and keep them able to train the next generation of young people. So that was really very interesting. I know you had, you mentioned a couple of books on your way, and for this audience who's still probably a bit more dispersed and locked down than usual, books are a good way to get off the screen and get the kinds of information and training that they might like to have. So I'll invite you to offer that list of books that you might have.
There's a couple of books that I buy and ship to my mentees pretty frequently. Amazon's just like, buy it again, and I just ship them to the people that I help coach, depending on whatever the topic is. But a few of those is, if you're interested in Agile development or Agile project management or Agile product management, Jeff Sutherland helped create Agile and the Scrum methodologies that we use nowadays. He didn't create it, but he helped turn it into what we use now in technology for Agile and Scrum development. If that interests you at all and you're interested in becoming a Scrum Master or project manager, I would strongly encourage you to read Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Amount of Time. It's a great book. It doesn't get very technical for me. It kind of explains it in a way that's easy to understand. If you don't know what any of those words mean, it's also a good book to read, just in general, because you can apply it to your everyday life. The other books that I love is The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Again, it's talking about being positive and changing your outlook on life. I mean, you can read it maybe in half an hour. It's a really thin book, but I appreciate books like that don't add just a ton of content for the sake of trying to get a bigger book. It's really good and has really kind of changed my life and my husband's life. I also love Bob Iger came out with a book, and I'm not saying that because he's a chairman of Disney, but he wrote the most interesting book I think that I've read in a lot of years, telling his story about being CEO of Disney for over a decade. And I just found the book very interesting, and it talks about leadership skills that he appreciates and looks for in people on his team. So those are a couple books that I think I would recommend to people depending on what their interests are.
That sounds great, and they sound really readable for anybody, not just people who are in that technical area. I think that the organizer of chaos signature name for you is so interesting, and we all live through chaos whether we want to or not, and it may not be the chaos of the situation that you had on launch night where you're trying to manage everything, but it's chaos nonetheless, whether it's a family chaos or whether it's because life has happened and it was not planned, or just because it's a hard time. And so chaos is tiring, it's exhausting, and it distracts you from what you're trying to do because you can't figure out quite how to get through it, to do it. And it creates people get depressed as a result of chaos because it just becomes overwhelming. So I was interested in how your Agile technology training and these various types of Agile technology that have evolved over time, how you find that useful in a broad area, not just in terms of a particular project.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
how you manage to triage situations and figure out what are the fundamental problems that have to be solved in order to go to the next level.
Yeah.
Maybe you could expand on that.
Yeah, I think the end of what you just said is key. I think there's kind of two things that are key. One is really defining the problem statement. What problem are you trying to solve? When I was down in Texas, I just started at the company that provided STEM homework for students in STEM courses, and they had just spent a lot of money redoing their corporate website, and the end result was they absolutely hated it because they were listening to all these different stakeholders and everybody had one thing that they were trying to do. And what they did when I was hired, the first thing I said to them is, what problem are you guys even trying to solve? Why are you redoing the corporate website, right? Are you trying to generate leads? Are you trying to make it easier for students to log in and get their homework? Are you trying to use it for marketing to attain new customers? Like, what problem are you really trying to solve? And people at work probably get tired of me doing that, but in the middle of a meeting when it seems like things are just like spiraling out of control and everybody's like adding one thing onto somebody else, what I always do is just stop the meeting and refresh and say, what problem are we trying to solve here? Let's start with that. And then the other piece that I think goes to the Agile piece that you asked about is Agile breaks everything down into really simple kind of what are called swim lanes. And it's when you're working on a project, it's things that are either to do, they're in progress, or they're done. And that is something that you can apply. I had a coworker who applied it to his daughter's wedding. Here's a laundry list of things that I need to do to get ready for her wedding. These are all the things that are in flight or in progress, and then these are all the things that are done. And you're physically or virtually moving sticky notes from one thing to another. And I think that can be applied to anything: cleaning out a house, moving, weddings, and then within technology, redesigning websites, creating new websites, creating an app, whatever it is. I think that fundamental Agile, practice can be applied to a lot of things.
You mentioned the setback that women had experienced as a result of COVID, and also the reason, trying to find out the reasons for why women leave tech. I think women, to a certain extent, leave tech or any job because the initial pay may not be enough. They get into the workforce and it raises their family tax level a notch, but they don't really earn enough to pay for quality childcare and things like that. So what are you seeing that could be done to help women, either through family, community, or the businesses themselves?
Yeah, I think we're at a different point in the pandemic than we were kind of earlier in the pandemic. I think earlier in the pandemic, it was impossible to find childcare. I think it was everybody was scared to send their children to childcare, and still are in places depending on where you live. Things are still really bad in the South. They're really bad in India. It just totally depends. But I think where we are in the pandemic right now, there might be a few more options. You might be able to extend, especially in New England when the vaccination rate's a lot higher. Right now, you feel like you can kind of extend that circle and get a little bit of relief. But I think as a whole, companies, again, it goes back to some of the things I talked about, like can offer flex time. They can offer, hey, if you need to go to your doctor appointment, your child's doctor appointment, take 2 hours. It's really not that big a deal. It's all going to balance out in the end. But I think that was a much bigger ordeal kind of earlier in the pandemic than it is right now. Not to say that everything's great and back to normal. The children under, a certain age still aren't vaccinated. Even though my husband and I are, our 2 children aren't. So our life really hasn't changed because we don't want to expose them to that. So I think as a company, you have to be aware of this and cognizant of this and do whatever you can. Companies aren't going to all be big enough to offer on-site childcare. They're not all going to continue to allow people to work from home, but brainstorm with your leadership team, whether that's your board or just your execs, and try to figure out what it is that you can help, and also survey your employees. Ask them, what would be helpful? How can we help you? Is there anything we can do that would help take something off of your plate or eliminate a little bit of stress in your life? And survey them. Call a town hall, ask for feedback, have some more one-on-ones randomly with people in your company that you don't normally talk to. I think you'd get a lot of value out of that.
I love hearing you talk about leadership. And I never really was tuned into leadership until at one of the Women of Innovation award nights, I sat next to a woman who designed the honors program for the cadets at the Coast Guard Academy. And leadership is, you know, built into their curriculum. She runs that curriculum, and it was very interesting. She shared with me a document that talked about the progression of leadership skills that they work on. So when I went to your background and saw that you had a special award and that organization has the touchstones of leadership, and I read those touchstones and I thought, you know, I wonder how that background helped Jenny move forward, or what specific leadership training did you get, if any, or are you a natural leader? So
yeah, I think what you're really getting at is kind of those soft skills that maybe they do teach, maybe they don't. I know at the UConn MBA program, leadership was its own course, and it was kind of touched upon in every course that I took. So I'm sure some of it is definitely education that I've received along the way. Some of it is stuff that my parents instilled in me and the community around me instilled in me. Sports was a huge part of that whenever you play sports. And I was a catcher and pitchers kind of call the game. And I think a lot of my leadership skills come from that. But I do think that there's some books and professional development opportunities that you can get along the way. Everything that I took was, a decade ago probably, so I won't mention them, but I'm sure that there's additional professional development opportunities out there now. And then also, like I said, MBA program or whatever the program is.
So I wanted to ask just one more question, and that is, when you have your various teams that divide up into groups to solve a problem, and those groups all have specific capabilities and skill sets, and you can sort of compare that to a division of labor at home, where we have, just for convenience sake, divided up the work that needs to get done, whether it's indoors or outdoors or childcare or repairs or what. But how do you find do you come across any tips or pitfalls for people who try to apply these techniques to their home life?
You mean like Agile type stuff, or you just mean in general? Yeah, I think for my husband and I can only speak to that, right? We kind of split all the responsibilities. Even though he's a stay-at-home dad, he does the dishes and the trash, but I do the laundry. And I think for every couple and every relationship and every position that you're in a company, it's a division of labor. And when I hire people or when I try to get new people onto a team, I try to get people whose strengths are my weaknesses, and I try to hire people or surround myself by people who I even think are smarter than me. And because I think that's how you grow. And so I think just having kind of open conversation about division of labor and really focusing on what you're passionate about is important. And my husband's not passionate about taking out the trash, but he doesn't hate it as much as I do. So it's a chore that he takes on instead of me. And I think at work too, like there's certain things I can do in Excel, and there's certain people that are way better at that than I am. And so I kind of divide up the labor based on what we're passionate about and interested in and how we like to express ourselves.
Well, I think it's really interesting. And with the help of people like you, more women, I think, will be striving to become empowered to do the work that it takes. It's great to have mentors and leaders, but the individual herself has to have that desire to learn. And as you said, raise your hand to take on a new challenge. So I think that what you're doing helps them feel comfortable trying that, and that the more that happens, people will make their businesses, their families, and their communities stronger and happier as a result. So thank you very much for what you do and for sharing that with us today. Do you have any last thing to say before we turn it back to the Women of Innovation team?
No, I just think if you got something out of this webinar, please reach out to me. I'd love to meet with you and connect. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, because this is a message that I try to share as loudly and as broadly as I can. So please feel free to reach out and connect with me. And I really appreciate each of you attending and your time. And thank you to the council for inviting me here today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Martha, for coverage of a really crucial area for Women of Innovation, which is supporting them. They can't get where they get without it. And so I want to thank you. And I also want you to mark your calendars, first of all, for this coming Friday. Again, we have until midnight on Friday for you to submit Women of Innovation. So if there's anybody that you think might deserve to be honored, please use the link and nominate. And also watch your calendar we're going to give you the precise date of the next webinar, which is going to be the week of July 26th. And we're going to be featuring Melissa Petruska, who is Senior Research Scientist at Sonata Scientific and a 2020 Women of Innovation Finalist. And we're combining that with the announcement of the 2021 Women of Innovation. So we hope to see you then. And on behalf of the Connecticut Technology Council and the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, thank you for joining us today.